Dr. Michael Shirmer is founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine, a monthly columnist for Scientific American. He's a regular contributor to a ton of different publications, including Time.com. He is a presidential fellow at Chapman University. He's author of a new book called The Moral Arc: How Science and Reason Lead Humanity Toward Truth, Justice, and Freedom. He's also author of tons of other books, including one that sort of led me into this podcast. I borrowed the title and changed it just a little bit, Michael. But your book is called Why People Believe Weird Things. And I wanted to talk about that on the radio, and I thought this would be a great opportunity. Dr. Shirmer, thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. And I didn't know that about the adoption of the book title. That's great.
Let's talk about Ben Carson, can we? I mean, we'll just start with him.
With a straight face.
Republican presidential candidate. He's a product of Johns Hopkins. He is a neurosurgeon. He's not a stupid man. And yet, he doesn't seem to embrace or understand basic evolutionary biology. He made the claim about the Star of David being on the American $1 bill. He's mentioned that he believed that the pyramids were built so that the biblical Joseph could store grain. And we're all looking at this otherwise intelligent man, and we're wondering what the hell is going on. Michael, what the hell's going on?
Well, he's not just a product of Johns Hopkins University. He's also a product of the Seventh-day Adventists. And in this case, his religion is trumping his science because Seventh-day Adventists are creationists. They're largely young Earth creationists, or at the very least, old Earth creationists. But they take the creationist model in any case and don't accept most of the science related to that. Now, how can you get through medical school believing that? The answer is you don't have to really understand evolutionary biology to get through med school. You can actually take all those classes, memorize all the parts and functions of the body, and get through chemistry and calculus and all that stuff without actually ever studying Darwin. I'm sure he knows something about it. I'm sure he's read about it, but he just rejects it because of his religion. But it isn't necessary to do what he did. It's not to denigrate neurosurgery at all. It's a super technical field, but you don't really have to understand how natural selection works to operate on a brain. These are largely independent fields. So, I mean, in a way, it'd be like asking what does knowing about neurosurgery have to do with economic policy? Nothing. He's not qualified to understand the economy just because he's a neurosurgeon. And so you can be smart in one area and really dumb in other areas, and that's the case for most of us. It's just that most of us aren't shooting our mouths off on national television running for president, and most of us don't venture into fields we know nothing about and make public statements like that. And so that's the short answer. Psychologically speaking, as I say in Why People Believe Weird Things, is that smart people believe weird things because they're better at rationalizing beliefs they arrived at for non-smart reasons, or that they hold for non-smart reasons. That is, people hold beliefs for emotional reasons, psychological reasons, religious reasons, and political, ideological reasons, and then they back into it with evidence after the fact that they filter to fit what they already believe, confirmation bias. And smart people, educated people, are better at that. And so they convince themselves, as well as some of their other followers, that they're really onto something because they're so smart. But in fact, it's really just the opposite.
Let's talk about confirmation bias for those who may not know what it is. Can you sort of flesh it out for us?
Yep. So the confirmation bias is where you look for and find confirming evidence for what you already believe, and you ignore the disconfirming evidence. That is, you remember the hits, you forget the misses. You just filter out information that doesn't confirm what you want to be true, and you allow in the information that fits. Everybody does it. We do it in all walks of life. There's a huge body of literature in cognitive psychology about this bias. It's kind of the mother of all cognitive biases. There's a host of these biases, dozens, but that's the biggest one. So, for example, just to run through a few of the experiments, like if you tell a subject that this person they're about to meet is introverted, shy, not particularly forthcoming or gregarious, and then you meet this person and fill out a little questionnaire about their personality, that's how they will be described. On the other hand, if you tell somebody else that this person is gregarious and extroverted, outgoing, and then they meet the exact same person who says the same things, they will rate them as outgoing extroverts. In other words, they'll find the things that seem to fit the diagnosis or the label. This is true in the mental health profession. We know from Robert Rosenhan's famous experiment in the late 60s, he and his fellow, and he was a professor, his graduate students checked themselves into a bunch of different mental hospitals. And, just all they were doing was complaining of hearing voices, and nothing very specific. And the moment they were checked in and diagnosed, they said, well, I don't hear the voices anymore. And then they acted completely normal from there on. The diagnoses were made by the psychiatrists working at these hospitals, and the patient descriptions were made by the employees at the hospital. The patients themselves weren't patients at all. They just then proceeded to act completely normally. And as Rosenhan describes it, the other patients knew right away, oh, come on, you guys are journalists or something. You're here investigating the hospital, right? Because they could tell they were acting normal. But the psychiatrists didn't get it. They filtered everything that the pseudo patients did as further evidence of their schizophrenic tendencies, and the erupting libidinal urges coming out in the painting, this kind of nonsense. And then after the experiment was over, they had to get out on their own, which took many, many weeks. In some cases, it's a little scary actually. It's hard to get out once you're in. He then told these hospitals about it, and they said, "Oh well, we wouldn't be faked. There's no way. Try it again. Send some pseudo patients and real patients to them, and we'll be able to tell the difference." And so then patients started coming in as usual, and they reported back that they figured out who it was, and when in fact he didn't send anybody in. So it's
now what's that about? Is that the staff was predisposed to automatically assume or believe that these people had some sort of psychological trouble. So they were just going to see it because they just expected it?
Correct. Yeah. The power of expectation, the power of labels and language to determine thought. It's a little bit of an indictment of the mental health profession to the extent that these psychiatric diagnoses are very subjective. It's a list of symptoms, behaviors. Patient exhibits X, Y, and Z most of the time, but not all of the time. And maybe there's 20 different symptoms of schizophrenia. How many do you have to have before you get the label? Is it 10? Is it 12? Is it 15? Is it 7? There's very little consistency across experts on what constitutes that particular set of characteristics that makes up a diagnosis. And it's a real problem. It's why the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, keeps evolving. Homosexuality was a disease in the 1950s, and it's finally taken out in the 70s. And there's a lot of those kinds of things that that are very disturbing. But in this context, I'm just talking about the power of labels and the confirmation bias. That once you have a theory about something, you then just find the evidence to fit it. Conspiracy theories work this way. The moment you think that 9/11 was an inside job, then you just go back and read the newspapers and watch the news reports and go, aha, there was something very odd right there at that corner, and look at this person acting very strange. And you start filtering out things that don't fit and filtering in things that do fit. It's like the JFK assassination. Once you decide, okay, I think it was a conspiracy, then you look at Dealey Plaza and you look at those photographs. Famous example, there's a guy with an umbrella standing there on the grassy knoll there. What's he doing with an umbrella? It was a perfectly sunny day. Why would somebody have an umbrella? Clearly that umbrella was a rifle of some kind, and he had a rifle built into the thing, and he shot Kennedy with it. Finally, that guy came forward in the 80s and said, yeah, I'm the umbrella man, because there was all these conspiracy theories about the umbrella man. And he said, I was out there protesting Kennedy. I was against his foreign policy and Cuba and all that, and that the umbrella was going back to the pre-World War II, when Neville Chamberlain came back from Munich after caving into Hitler's demands to acquire Austria, and so he came back. He had an umbrella, and so the umbrella became the symbol of protest against accommodationism with about foreign policy.
What, Kennedy was supposed to make that connection as he turned the corner? I mean, that's sort of a big leap, isn't it?
Oh, it's a huge leap. But again, once you have the idea in mind, then everything becomes pregnant with meaning. Like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, what is that over there? And if you don't believe it, then those sort of things just go flying right by your senses.
Oh, Michael, you just guaranteed that the comment section is going to go insane with 9/11. I mean, how many years has it been? And it even among the quote unquote skeptical community, it's especially in the month of September, it's rampant. Building 7 and thermite controlled demolition. I mean, one thing after the other. The only thing missing is the Illuminati, right? But these are intelligent people.
Oh, yes. Again, intelligence and belief are orthogonal, as I say in my book. That is, they're like this. They're not really related to each other. It's not like one goes up, the other goes up or down. They're independent of each other, except for the fact that if you're smart and educated and very well-read, you're better able to defend the beliefs that you hold for very non-smart reasons. Anyway, that's how it works. If you're conservative, you read the Wall Street Journal. You listen to conservative talk radio and so on. If you're liberal, you read the New York Times and you listen to NPR. And it's just, we all filter the world around us by our beliefs. We mostly want to hang around fellow liberals or fellow conservatives. We mostly want to read people that already agree with us because it's rewarding. It feels good. You get a little dopamine hit when you read something that confirms what you already believe. And we know the neuroscience of it. But the confirmation bias is very powerful, and it's very disruptive to getting at the truth, which is why science has this self-correcting machinery built in, this peer review system. You can't operate in a vacuum. You need to bounce your ideas off of other people who can tell you that you're wrong, and they have to feel free that they can tell you that you're wrong, which is why we have free speech in a civil society. We need to, nobody's going to get it right all the time. We need to have people bouncing ideas off each other and criticizing each other, or else we're going to go down the path incorrectly.